attitudes came from the recognition of the impact of second-hand smoke. So it was no longer just a person voluntarily subjecting himself or herself to this particular risk, but you're actually subjecting your neighbor, your family members, and everyone else. And then societal attitudes started to change. And so you started to see people saying, boss, smoke outside or far away. Otherwise, growing up, I've been on planes where you could smoke, right? I mean, a fairly closed environment, but you could still smoke, and they would hand out cigarettes on planes in the 1970s, on international flights and things like that. And if you're in some old aircraft, you might still find a little ashtray in your seat handle, actually. Anyways, the point being that all that changed. And then people started to, then the other thing was voluntary as well as involuntary regulations, meaning imposed regulations on separation of smoking and non-smoking areas, and eventually moving smoking to outside areas rather than inside. So all these sorts of things happened. And for me, I think the biggest indicator of, what shall we say, of societal attitude change was when I was in the US, I started to see in the dating columns, they would say, only a non-smoker should respond. The moment that happens, I don't know what it's like with the Tinder generation, but at least in those days, once you see that this is the only non-smokers should respond, then you see that something's changed. People are very, very clear. And that's how regulations evolved here as well. You had bans on advertising, bans on sponsorship. There is still surrogate advertising of some kinds, but but it's not that effective anymore. Just like you have with liquor, Kingfisher, soda water, something like that. It's all there is always surrogate ways of doing things. But nonetheless, the statutory warning, as Mr. Prabhu said, didn't really make much of a difference. Okay, in fact, the language was so heavy. Okay, cigarette smoking, may be injurious to health or something like that. Now it's much more direct, right? There is, a huge graphic, ugly picture covering the brand of the cigarette itself, and it says smoking will kill you, or smoking kills, something of that sort. So those are very, very graphic ways, but again, it's not clear that the effect is very significant because people get used to it, and in any case, the addiction, the need for nicotine overrides the concern about a possible horrible future. Anyway, that's one side. The other, of course, the other massively impactful regulation that came out in India, to my mind, is actually one that I did not think would be effective, because it's not one that can be easily policed. And this is Anbumani Ramdas's ban on smoking in public places, right? And who's there to enforce this, right? How many people can you catch and punish and things like that? But societally, overall, it seems to have been accepted. And as a result, you don't find that many people, everyone seems to be following this practice of going out, not subjecting somebody else to this, not insisting on smoking in private places. I'm not even sure exactly what all is allowed and what is not, but nonetheless, it's in my anecdotal understanding, it seems to have actually worked and brought the whole consumption down. Now, the other side of all this is, if people do want to reduce their consumption, how do you help them? How do you give them a nicotine fix in a manner that is possibly less harmful? Harm reduction, as Dr. Sharma pointed out, right? And so this is where I had a dispute with Dr. Harshvardhan and the government for coming up with the particular approach that they chose with electronic nicotine delivery service systems or ENDS or whatever they call it. So basically, obviously the science of these new technologies, it will not be fully understood because we don't know, there are some studies from UK which show that it is massively less harmful than smoking tobacco. Because when you smoke, you're inhaling all kinds of other products. The burnt paper, carbon monoxide, various other things. When all you're after is a nicotine fix. right? So like you mentioned, nicotine patches have been used for quite a while to wean people off, of direct consumption through smoking. And so the same approach is what I thought is the philosophy behind these newer technologies, which is give a chance to get that nicotine fix without possibly the same level of harms, maybe much reduced. There may still be some harms, and we don't know, because even these devices use different kinds of, some other kinds of material to get that to you, right? I've forgotten the technical language for that, but nonetheless, the basic thing is you are using some organic chemicals to make the smoke sensation happen and things of that sort. And we don't know what impact on your health would arise from consumption of that. So, but nonetheless, on the face of it, on the basis of the US studies or UK studies, it seemed to me fairly clear that the evidence suggested that these new technologies should not be banned, but should actually be allowed if it will allow people to shift from the more harmful methods of ingesting nicotine to a less harmful. But the minister and the health secretary at that time were very, very insistent that a ban was imperative and urgent because Juul, I think, was about to enter the Indian market. And they said, we want to prevent this from entering before it does. Mrs. Preeti Sudan wrote an article in an op-ed piece. Can I just have some water, please? Where she said that she had seen youngsters using these devices, and she was very upset about it in a park or something like that. That's hardly the basis for such a stringent regulation. And so my proposal there was, okay, don't ban. Ban will lead to underground activities, which it has, all right? And because those who consume are able to still source materials, but it may not be as pure as you can't go sue somebody underground for in a consumer court, for example. No, I'm fine. Yeah. The basic point is that my solution was, just like nicotine patches or other solutions which are offered to people through a prescription. Why don't you allow that? This way, children just can't go get hold of them. People who want to cease their addiction to tobacco could move towards an alternative and things like that. But the minister was unmoved. And, of course, we are opposition MPs. And I have had a chance I have had the opportunity once on the surrogacy regulation bill where the government actually listened to me, and even though a bill had been passed in the Lok Sabha, they actually set up a select committee and changed the law after some of our criticism. So, occasionally opposition members do have some impact, but certainly not in this context. But I'm continuing to write about this. I'm working on a policy paper on this subject, and I'm speaking about this because I do think that it's never too late to reconsider, and it's possibly the right thing to do to move away from, tobacco consumption through the regular, platforms to maybe less harmful alternatives. The impact could be very significant. The health costs, direct and indirect, are tremendous. The economic costs on people and their families are also tremendous. And so it's imperative that tobacco regulation evolves to reduce harm, to provide people with enough information, and scales up efforts like cessation clinics, etc., that will help people literally wean themselves off these addictions. But for that, you need alternative methods, including ENDS, which will allow people to sort of phase out over time. And that's the real submission that I have here today. And I hope that we will move towards a future which is much more rational, which allows people to voluntarily find ways out of their now involuntary addiction to the product that they should have stayed away from in the first place. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Gowda, for your inputs. I was hoping, in fact, you would touch upon the topics you did touch upon, and the need for alternative delivery systems, if you will. And I hope that door hasn't really closed yet in India completely. Maybe it's slightly ajar, and the government, of course, can look into it. And, I'm not a partisan, but like Professor Gowda, I have occasionally smoked one or two cigarettes in my life, and as Anil clearly knows, we used to work together as well. And he mentioned Juul as well. Clearly from personal experience, it's an anecdote, and I'm not a partisan for e-cigarettes or Juul or anybody else. It did help me reduce the number of cigarettes I smoked in a day, and then Juul got banned in a jiffy. So I'm back to smoking. But anyway, that's a personal anecdote, certainly not a partisan for Juul or any other electronic delivery system. Our next speaker, and before I introduce my next speaker, our keynote speaker, Dr. Madan Gopal, I would like to indulge in your patience a little bit. We have our participants as well, and I don't want them to completely be on the listening end of this seminar and this engagement. So I will, in fact, try and incorporate some sort of interactive session. Not a session really, but I would like to ask certain participants who are here today to say their piece and ask a question to our keynote speaker, Professor Gowda, who's just spoken. If they have a question, I'd also ask you to please be very brief, because we have a long way to go, many more speakers, another session later. So very quickly, I'd like to ask a couple of people if they have to say their piece and ask a question. I can see one hand right here. Dr. Saab, thank you so much. I'd again request you to be very brief in your statement and your question, sir.
I can hear you, sir.
You can. It's a small hall. You can just say your question, sir.
I'm Dr. Khilnani. I was formerly professor and head of pulmonary medicine, and currently I am at PSRI hospital. I am the end user of smoking, in the sense that our OPD rarely have 6 gentlemen because they don't smoke. That is one thing, and also I have another distinction of that I was the member of ICMR expert committee, which recommended the ban on. Oh. so I'm qualified to speak just after you. So I would like to apprise you with certain facts about being a pulmonologist and the part of that expert committee about the vaping. What is vaping? That it gives nicotine by the propellant is a compound, which is polyethylene glycol and some other chemicals, which are some are known and some are unknown. The positive impact is that it gives the feeling that you are smoking. The negative impact is that there is unregulated delivery of nicotine, and the propellants are harmful, they are carcinogenic, there have been fires in the lung, that's about it. And if I talk about the scientific studies, none of the scientific studies have proven that vaping leads to reduction in tobacco smoking, cigarette smoking for that matter. Another thing, and I'm quoting the US studies, the 90% of the students of class 10 are vaping, and 60% of the students, class 6th and 7th, have started vaping. What it led to, that actually they were induced into tobacco smoking. That is the scientific data. If we talk about India, 90% of the class 10 students have already started consuming tobacco at least once. What you used to do in college, now people are doing in school because the development is faster. So what I'm giving you scientific data that why this committee, which I was co-chairing, recommended a ban which came as an ordinance. That till that time, that is 2.5 years back when this committee met, none of the studies have proven that it reduces to lesser addiction, that is one. Secondly, the people who resorted to vaping as an alternative smoking, they did not quit smoking, they did vaping plus smoking. That was often. Ultimately, it, the committee thought under the chairmanship of Dr. Srinath Reddy that vaping does not lead to reduction in tobacco smoking. So it's a public health point of view. It's harmful to the community. The more children will take to vaping because it's like you have hookah smoking. Now, one hookah smoking session of 60 minutes is equal to 100 cigarettes. This is a scientific fact. So you have to use science into the policy. And I'm very sure about that. Vaping is not going to reduce the prevalence of smoking, neither in the younger nor in the older, nor it is going to help in quitting smoking.
Right,
Thank you.
right. Thank you, sir. Again, I'd like to ask everybody who I will give a chance to speak right now to please be brief. We have a limited amount of time. The guests also have a limited amount of time. Very quickly, I see some hands here, but we also have some other participants. Ashok Arora is an eminent lawyer. He wants to say his piece. Sir, again, I'll have to ask you to be very, very brief. Okay, you can stay there. We can get you a mic there. Yes,
No,
sir.
no, surely I'll just conclude in
Right, sir.
less than 5 minutes. For sure, maybe less than 3 minutes.
I think 2 minutes is the ideal. But anyway, go ahead, sir.
I mean, if you give mic to a lawyer and expect him to finish in 5 is a grace. And in fact, the
One can try, sir.
excuse is I am to go back to court, you know. And we have a very senior lawyer here who is a scholar. So you would listen to scholar more. I am not that scholarly. I have been an outstanding student because I was always outside the class. But thing which I wish to say here is something not important because I am saying it is important because Abraham Lincoln said 150 years back. 150 years back, unfortunately, on a serious count, neither the US nor Europe nor our own India, we say that we are the Vishwa Guru. We are no more Vishwa Guru. If you are saying 450 million, now why I'm here, not 250 million, why I'm here not as a lawyer. But interestingly, I mean, we all committed mistakes, but one thing which I love about myself is I started studying child psychology when my child was conceived. He is 39 now, a smart, handsome man. The problem is we have not invested in what Oscar Wilde says, nothing worth learning can be taught. So what can be taught, you have to imbibe through music, through couplets, through movies, through stories. वो नानी दादी कहानी सुनाती थी. That's why I'm sorry, on little different note I am saying. He says, नशा पिला के गिराना तो सबको आता है, मज़ा तो तब है कि गिरते को थाम ले साकी. That is the difficult task. I think we are all these seminars, debates. You have told us, Dr. Nair, that it has not helped. Suresh Prabhu told us it has not helped. These theories, studies would not help, would not help. Statutory warning would not help. What is most important is to tell them imbibe values, tell them, I'll recite one, I mean, there must be some Sikh gentleman here or lady, but what Guru Nanak Dev said, I'll explain the meaning. He says, Ak dhatura sura pan utar jaye prabhat, which actually means any nasha you do would be over in couple of hours. But the nasha of truth, nasha of love, nasha of compassion, nasha of creative activity would survive. That is why we have to teach them. I am fortunate, you know, Justice Bhasin Saab would tell us, Justice Kurian Joseph, who has been one of the finest judges ever the Supreme Court produced, he invited me when he was High Court Chief Justice in Maharashtra, in Himachal. And he said, Ashok, you talk to these guys because values you imbibe, create some interest in football, cricket, hockey, tennis, swimming, acting. That is why Guru Nanak Dev Ji said, imagine 500 years back he said, Ak datura sura pan utar jaye prabhat और नाम खुमारी नानका चढ़ी रहे दिन रात. That means we have to teach them some nasha which would continue for ages, for lives. So unless we work on that, we are not going to succeed. I'm sorry, I conclude.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, my apology, I crave leave. I have to go back to court, especially from Bhasin Saab. My YouTube talks are there. You can show it to students if you wish to. Ashok Arora, if you just type Ashok Arora.
Right.
There are quite a few talks.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Athar.
you so much for
my
your time.
indulgence, but I'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
I'll take the literature and be in touch. Thank
We
you very much.
continue with the program as scheduled. Again, I'll take one very brief, quick word from one more participant before I move on to Dr. K. Madan Gopal. I see another hand, sir, but there's one hand before you. We have Dr. Reema Dada, who perhaps wants to say something or what she's heard of Professor Rajiv Gowda. Can we have the mic to Dr. Reema Dada, as well as you heard Dr. Aruna Sharma
Yeah, I
and
just-
Suresh Prabhu. Please be
Thank
brief,
you,
ma'am.
Athar.
We have to move on. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I just wanted to highlight, the way you said that we can, change the way we communicate things. I think we have to enhance awareness. We are always focusing on the person, and I'm working on male reproductive health and how it causes, infertility, recurrent spontaneous abortions, but also not only does smoking impact the person himself, because the sperm is really a cell in crisis. It's the only cell in the body which does not have a repair mechanism. It's silent. And also it sheds off majority of its antioxidants. So the downside of that is smoking not only affects the person, but it also affects the offspring. And the rapid increase in autism, childhood schizophrenia, depression, is all because of father's sperm deterioration in quality. So I think if this also is brought into, awareness is enhanced, and it's also very important to realize that each experience, right from the time when they start smoking, maybe at the age of 13, 14, like you said, they start in school, each leaves a mark. So it's not that just before planning to have a child, you just stop smoking and, lead a healthy lifestyle. Each has each leaves a mark, because now there's a concept of epigenetics, which is how your lifestyle, how your behavior, how your thoughts, what you smoke, you eat, actually leaves a mark on the germ cell. And of all the cells in the body, the sperm is the only one which doesn't protect itself.
Right.
And just I want to add another thing, if you can enhance that awareness. For the last 12 years, we are working on the impact of yoga in various complex diseases. And yoga is the only modality which can act on both the sperm, mitochondrial, and the nuclear DNA integrity, and also on the epigenome.
Right.
And majority of the antioxidants do not penetrate, especially in a cell like the sperm, which has a very compact DNA. So I think increasing the awareness among men don't know, it's always the women who's blamed for infertility, abortions, miscarriages.
I think that's a social evil more than anything
Yeah,
else. But
so
thank you for your
then-
intervention, ma'am. And you learn a new thing every day. I'd like to invite now, without further delay, Dr. K. Madan Gopal. And before you come out here, sir, I heard another respected doctor, Dr. Gilani, said something about there is no scientific evidence that backs the claim that harm reduction perhaps is the way to go, and e-cigarettes or alternate delivery systems do in fact reduce harm. Now, he knows better than me. He's a medical practitioner. I'm not, but I've read research which perhaps leads me to believe that it's not a closed chapter yet. I would like your views on that, if you could incorporate that. You are, after all, from our premier policy-making body, Niti Aayog. Please give a round of applause to our next keynote speaker, Dr. K. Madan Gopal. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning, distinguished panelists on the dais and esteemed participants. It's very interesting that we have been talking about tobacco prevention, banning, everything. As everybody has mentioned that it has to involve people. We have been always saying that I have been always highlighting we have to understand the felt needs and the health needs of the people. If their felt need is, I should be having tobacco, you can't help. Whatever health needs you perceive from your side. Tobacco consumption, what we are seeing, I should not be quoted on that, but if you go to any field level primary health school, if you ask the teacher and ask the experience of the teacher, he will say that Maku and Tambaku are in part and parcel of a 10 years old boy. He would be having Maku in his pocket. That is there. That's a fact of life. And from there, how it comes, because the BD and the pawn shop which they are having, he provides the BD patta free of charge to that small boy, because he can't afford to purchase the tobacco. That kind of problem which we are dealing. That means the societal value, though it has deteriorated, it is only driven by greed. He is having his own marketing strategy. The moment if I edit that person, the person would be, after a while, he would be purchasing that tobacco from him. Initially, if you go to any shop, even in Delhi also, ask for a BD patta, you will get free of cost. Because he knows that after chewing the BD patta, he will come back to you, and after some time, he will be going into some other form of that kind of prevalence is there. Though we have tried to regulate it, because if you talk about regulation in India, if you are educated enough, lawyers are there here. If you are educated enough, you cite anything and you are having a law for that. But regulating, do we have the capacity to regulate? No, it has to be a people's movement. That's why there has been focus on Jan Andolan. We do have COPTA, which talks about the regulation, the trade, and the practices, but it don't talk about the banning of tobacco. And there's a debate going on whether tobacco it is a food product or not. That in front of the honorable court, some petitions are there, and a decision would be taken. If it is a food, then the FSAI Act would get into this and they can ban it. Otherwise, whatever they are doing it under the purview of that, that's one thing. Apart from that, the cause and effect things which we have been talking, it takes time, because the longitudinal study which we have always been referring about this cancer, smoking leads to cancer, cancer of lung. So we have to, and it's a time-taking thing, and people will never appreciate that, because they will say that since the age of 8-9 years I've been chewing tobacco, I've been consuming it, and you see that it's not a single episode. It's the episode starts from that way, and they want to. You require more and more stronger nicotine to get the same kind of kick. And as a result, the person ventures into other modalities. As madam, you have rightly pointed out, if you see the number of the infertility clinics, because if you look at the trend which the gynecologists they are having, your contention, your observation, it holds true, because lot of infertility clinics are coming, because the smoking is one of the causative factor for that. After 4 or 5 years of practice, most of the obs and gynae, they are venturing into infertility clinic because they know that this problem is there. The second question which we have to ask, because regulations and other things, that debate and discussion will go on. Do we have enough cancer hospitals to take care of these people? No. Even if we make a cancer hospital, the rate at which the consumption of tobacco and other things are going on is very difficult. The only methods which we can do is preventing it, that too through the school education. We do have a school health education program, but if you go to any school, not to talk about the urban area, the urban people, they would be having vaping and other things, but at the rural area, they are having tobacco, they are chewing tobacco. It's a rampant practice in the rural areas. Not to talk about that. Very sorry to say that what we are doing for the future of the country. We talk about the demographic dividend. If you talk about the BMI of the population, if you might have encountered the younger working population, how much effort, how much work they can do without tobacco and other things. You see how the economic impact of the, one of the things which we have to do is to have a behavioral nudge kind of units everywhere. We have a structure in the National Tobacco Control Program. At the national level, we are having a tobacco unit. State level also we are having, district level also we are having. But where is the behavioral nudge? We have to nudge the cigarette smoking is injurious to health. But what? Where is the behavioral nudge to, who are the people who can nudge these people to have a protective practice? The second important thing, harm reduction, another thing is very difficult, because as the addiction is very chronic, he requires an equal amount of nicotine. And if you are giving nicotine in any form, in any way, that is not harm reduction. You are doing more harm to the person than doing good for that person. Because you become so much dependent on the nicotine for even your day-to-day life, and he will be seeking more and more this, and as a result, if you do a study about the substance abuse and the nicotine, you will find that the person has been trying nicotine for long, now he wants to have a more higher kick and other thing, as a result he will land into substance abuse. So we are taking that thing. Another aspect which is coming and which is related to smoking is the mental health. We have been talking about mental health, but we don't accept that it's a part and parcel of this. With the regulation, we have to see that how we address all this challenge, one the mental health, the infertility, whether we are ready for dealing with the cancer patients or not. So it's very easy, philanthropic to have a cancer hospital, but it's very difficult to have a preventive program for cancer. Though with the efforts of the awareness, the banning and other thing, you now have no smoking rooms. People will say that I'm going out and smoking. That kind of secondary smoking is not there, but still lot of work is required to be done. Regulation, one or low, would be there. Banning will result into some illegal activities and people will smoke because they are so much dependent on that nicotine level for a long time. If they are into college, they are already 10 years into the tobacco chewing habits. And after that, they will be seeking for more and more. That's why you see, it's not only tobacco chewing, it is leading to substance abuse and other things. We have to be very careful and guarded in that when we are making policies and banning things. Banning is not the answer. We have to find ways. Though there is a petition in the petition committee of the parliament, they are trying to see that whether we can have a ban on the tobacco or not. But we have to find out a way. Still, there is debate going on whether it is food or not. Still, debate goes on whether with that act we can ban this tobacco or not. And the second act is about the regulation, whether having an advertisement will result in reduction in the smoking or not. The narrative needs to be changed that we don't have, it causes cancer, do we have adequate facilities for treating this patient? So, ठीक है, आप करते रहिए, but do we have adequate facility for treating this patient? This is leading to infertility. Now you see the cost of the infertility which the urban people are having. The cost of moving from the tobacco abuse to the substance abuse, you have to find out, because there the harm reduction, usually substitutes are being used and they are quite effective. Instead of having an addictive thing, in the substance abuse you can have a harm reduction thing, but here in nicotine, if you think that it would be harm reduction, as a medical doctor, I don't think, because it is having an addictive value. In the clinics, when an old person comes to us saying that they are chewing tobacco for the last 50 years, we never ask them to stop tobacco because we know that whole of his system is dependent on tobacco. Unless that particular nicotine level is there, his system will not work. And reducing that thing is a very, very humongous task and it's quite, in fact, not possible if the person is addicted for a long time. The future proofing of tobacco regulation, we can do that, but it's very, very difficult proposition. We do have 2 acts. Lot of discussions are going on. We are adding on how to prevent, how to reduce the advertisements and other things. But once the things goes into your subconscious, it's very difficult to take it out from then and nudge the person to change his behavior. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Madan Gopal. Unfortunately, we are behind schedule, and I'm going to try and make that up with the permission of the chairperson. I would like to, yes, Dr. Gowda?
No, I just wanted to respond to the
Yes,
points
please,
that were made here. Dr. Kilnani's point, the US, part of the impact problem than the actual nicotine consumption. As you said, the propellants, the jury is still out on that. But at the same time, I'm not a scientist. I am a consumer of scientific reports. And so if there is a report from the UK, from the National Health Service, which says it has helped reduce harm there and wean people away, I give that some credibility as well. So these are all frontier areas where we may not know the answer, and I also mentioned that we don't know, and we may not know, but at least the byproducts of what shall we say, burning will not be there like in a cigarette. So that's one thing. But you also made an important point that this could become a gateway, right, to actual cigarette smoking or something else. While I've been emphasizing the other pathway to phase out. Now there, Dr. Madan Gopal says you can't reduce, you're going to keep the level of nicotine the same. My understanding of nicotine patches and that kind of treatment is that you lower the amount over time, so that slowly the amount of nicotine that that the body is used to also comes down. So so that's the logic there seems to be that you could actually reduce the dependence on nicotine. As you said, if you've been doing it for 60 years and your whole body can't live without it, that's like being an alcoholic or something like that. It's a very, very different proposition. But I do think a significant number of people may be helped by these kinds of interventions, which will help phase out the amount of nicotine that would come in. As I said,
Madan Gopal, is tobacco use the only cause for cancer?
No, there are other,
lots of others.
because if you are smoking, because the bench pyrene brings in the this paper of the cigarette, that more or less has been attributed to cause cancer.
Right. I would request participants not to please speak out of turn. We have a schedule to maintain. Sorry, sir, but I have to say that. Before we ask the chairperson to conclude this plenary session, can I slip in one question of my own? Dr. Gowda, Professor Gowda, Dr. K. Madan Gopal, the question is simple. Should we be aiming for a smoke-free future or a nicotine-free future? Are they the same thing, and should that be distinguished? First you and then Dr. Gowda. Very quickly, very briefly.
We should be aiming at both the things. The smoke-free future, that is more or less evident. Nowadays, you will find many places which are smoke-free. But we should be aiming at nicotine-free. That's the biggest challenge, because we are dealing with the future of the country.
But are they the same thing? Harm reduction is what this is all about.
No, it's not harm reduction. It is reduction in the consumption of nicotine. If the dependence is there, whatever methods you apply, because if you look at the HIV/AIDS program, where they are having this harm reduction program,
Right.
they are substituting the IV injectors with the other opiate derivatives. But substitute for nicotine is not there. You have
Okay.
to.
So you're rejecting the methadone clinic idea. Professor Gowda, 2 lines on this, then I'll ask Dr. Sharma to
See,
conclude this.
people are complex. People are prone to addictions. And so regulation needs to step in, which recognizes human frailty. And, in the US, now many states have started legalizing marijuana. On the other hand, before this happened, there were a lot of youth who were sent to jail for many years and came out as, really disturbed people because of that experience for possession of small quantities of something which is, a drug, but not necessarily that harmful a drug, possibly, right? So this it's a balance. That's what India has also chosen, to allow tobacco, to allow alcohol. This is because the other side of it is potentially worse.
Fair enough.
So
Apologies
I
for-
think
yeah.
there are trade-offs involved. We have to live
Apologies
with
for
them.
taking more of your time. I'd like to ask Dr. Aruna Sharma to conclude. Please come and conclude this plenary session. We'll go straight into the second session after this. Dr. Sharma, if you could say a few words to close this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I thank Mr. Suresh Prabhu, Mr. Rajiv Gowda, Dr. Mohan, and all the audience who raised a very, very pertinent question. And here I will say this session has brought out very clearly that ban is not the answer. The only way to proceed ahead is to bring in more and more awareness and to have alternatives which will help people to shift from tobacco consumption to other less harmful means, and then maybe sort of wean off completely. So that graduated way is very, very important when we are moving ahead with it. I thank the Policy Circle for giving this opportunity, because we are running over time. So I'm very sure while the documentation of it happens, we'll wrap it up much more in detail. Thank you. Thank you so much. And over to you for moving ahead for the next session. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Both the keynote speakers, Professor Gowda, Dr. K. Madan Gopal, thank you for your time. Unfortunately, we don't have time for a break. We are on a sched, like I said before, so I will be moving straight into the next plenary session. We'll also have a round of photographs with the keynote speakers and Anil Nair, the founder of Policy Circle, is right there. Sajana Nair, co-founder, Policy Circle, is also on the dais. And yes.
Done?
Thank you. Thank you, Anil. Thank you, Sajana. Thank you, Dr. Gowda, Dr. Kemadal Gopal. And with that, our first plenary session comes to an end. Let me just build ground for the second plenary session, which will begin right away. It's a new set of speakers, and we have some eminent panelists who will be joining us for the second session as well. And I'll introduce them momentarily.
Some money as petrol became unleaded. That's how tobacco has to be treated so that the dangerous polyphenol make a cigarette or whatever, because you cannot stop people to stop smoking. It has been happening since time immemorial. So we need to take out that dangerous element from the tobacco so that it becomes safer. I would not say absolutely safe, but harm reduction. And government should spend some money on the research of this, and then tax people who are smoking for this to fund that research. Period. I know because I know something about it. I'm not recommending, but out of let's say fashion as to what vaping is, I purchased it in Europe and saw as to what it is, and then I found that it has got absolutely those labels: zero nicotine, 1.6 and 3.6, and only nicotine, and no polyphenols and which causes.
Well, I can if you want. Um, I know many of you did not get the chance to speak. I apologize for that. We were on a clock, but the second session I hope will be slightly more easy, slightly easier, and I hope everyone who wants to talk, just put their hand up. I will come to you, I promise. And we'll start about in 2 minutes. Just give me 2 minutes. I apologize, I couldn't because the first session was kind of tight. The second session I'm hoping will be not as easier. So easier, yeah. I'll come back to you all.
the liberty of coming in, speaking as and when she does come. However, let's kick the session off. I'd like to ask Dr. M.C. Mishra, former director of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, to say his piece. Dr. Mishra.
Please.
Thank you, Athar. Thank you, Anilji, for the invitation, and Rajeshwar for dragging us in this. Because I asked him, what do I have to do with tobacco? मैं तो ट्रॉमा का आदमी हूँ, उसे इंजरी प्रिवेंशन के लिए आप बात करते हैं, लेकिन there are similarities when we discuss the human behavior कि smoking or chewing tobacco. I'll start with few case scenarios actually. One of my seniors at Allahabad Medical College way back in 1978-79, he was in the habit of having pan and tobacco, and he was a surgeon. Another doctor turned politician from Bihar. He walked into my OPD. This was when Mr. Narasimha Rao was Prime Minister and he was Member of Parliament from Bihar. And I did a biopsy on his tongue. And I knew what it is. And he survived maybe 6 months after that diagnosis. And he was chewing tobacco and pan. Another person I knew very closely was a professor of community medicine. And he was director of National Institute of Health and Family Welfare. He was in the habit of chewing tobacco and pan. Again, all these gentlemen are no more in this world. That my colleague from Allahabad, he succumbed. Mr. Manoj Pandey, who was the Member of Parliament, he succumbed very quickly. Dr. Devkinandan, he succumbed. Another doctor from RML Hospital, and he was a senior doctor. And we used to tell him, why don't you have chewed enough, why don't you quit now? None of them would listen. So this is the human behavior we're talking. And I was introduced to this when I was very young, maybe 10-year-old, if I recollect, in mid-60s. Mother-in-law of my eldest sister in Agra, she lived near Manpuri. And Manpuri tobacco you must have heard of. I think a lot of work was done in Agra also at that time, at ICMR also, with Manpuri tobacco habit. And it was the betel nut in small grated way and tobacco put together in the mouth, and she developed oral cancer at that time, and naturally there was no treatment and she died of that. So I have seen enough of oral cancer. I think smoked tobacco, most of the people in the morning talked about that. In India, smoked tobacco is a problem, but chewing tobacco is much more a problem, societal problem in rural as well as urban India. Whether UP, whether Bihar, whether southern states, it's a huge problem. So what our cancer specialist and chief of cancer center, Dr. Rath, says 80-20. In India, it is 80-20. That 80% cancers are in head and neck, and 80% are tobacco related. And they are preventable, as somebody said. And this is what similarly I find in injury. When we say, we talk about COVID deaths, we talk about other problems in India, and here we have the tobacco-related incidents. If you look at in our country or globally also, that there was a study in UK which actually looked at the lifespan of medical professionals over 40 years, those who was indulging in tobacco, smoking, naturally in the UK more so. And when we say in morbid obesity, 12 years of our life are taken away with the obesity. So if you are supposed to live for 80 years, you will live 12 years shorter. The tobacco also does the same. 7.5 to 10 years lifespan is shorter if you are smoking. But there are a lot of anecdotes. People say, he was smoking and he lived for 90 years. He was in 80 years, but people don't know their lifestyle, what they compensated with, the trade-off, the physical activity, their diet, and etc. So almost 1.6 billion tobacco users globally, as it is, the figures are. And India is the dubious distinction for everything, so is for tobacco. That second largest producer, second largest consumer, and what Athar has been talking about, harm reduction. And that is where I think the challenge lies for all of us, that should we, and Dr. Khilnani also spoke about that, but I think regulation can do, it is important, it can do good, like when I'm a surgeon, so when I used to go to my OT, Dr. Khilnani, Dr. Ravi Batra used to smoke in the changing room. And I always used to fight with him. Go out and smoke, don't smoke here. We had a lot of fight on that, smoking. So regulation, what it did, that once it was banned in public places and workplaces, we could authoritatively tell people not to smoke. Like if you're traveling in car, or you're traveling in bus, train, then you can tell people, please don't smoke here. It's not allowed. And people would listen then. Otherwise, before that, they'll fight and they will not listen to you. So that regulations also are important. It's not that they are not. And then basically, tobacco advertising is cut down quite a lot now. We see surrogate advertising might be there, but I don't see for this thing. I think some of the films and television serials, they still camouflage smoking by writing that. That should also be banned forthwith, because it does impact younger population, who is smoking and where. So they find and they feel that it is somewhat useful if it is allowed in the serials or films. I think it has been done quite a lot, but I think more needs to be done in that area. And then actually, there is an article with, I think Anilji sent me, one of the articles he sent me, which was discussing about what Athar was asking, is it the nicotine or the smoking? What is more harmful? So naturally it is related to the duration, the amount, quantity what we consume, whether it's chewing or smoked tobacco. But yes, the human behavior, as Dr. Nimesh will, I think, talk about it more, banning may not be altogether possible, and banning always brings about, like in Bihar, every now and then you hear the spurious liquor killing people. So that happens. So we have to find alternatives. And India, large rural population indulge in BD. So there is employment. All those issues also come. From medical perspective, like people ask those who we operate, and then they'll ask, Dr. Sab, can we take a drink after 1 week or so of operation? I said, look, as a doctor, I cannot ask you to take drink. But it is not going to harm. So if you have been taking, you may take, but don't ask me. Don't get endorsed by me. The doctor has told me, so I can take it. So I think that is where is the problem comes up. But I think is more so the low socioeconomic group is impacted by BDs, by chewing tobacco, by pan paraks, because it's a 1 rupee sachet of these all these products which come in these small sachets, and that is actually doing much more harm, and they develop this addiction to that, and it's a very paradoxical situation. Like IPL was going on, and we could see the advertisement for these games. And they'll very quickly say it may be addictive. Then why we allow? And you are indulging the young people, the children, to indulge in this betting games and all that. So I think it's a very difficult rope for even politicians. I would say policymakers, it's not easy. What should be banned, what should not be banned, because there is always hue and cry. But I think this article, Anilji, what you sent was a good article, where I think he wrote very lately in January 2022 that we should rethink nicotine and respect consumer. I think that's the title of that article. What he is saying, the same thing what I think Rajiv and both Madan discussed, that banning may not be the only wise thing. So we have to provide alternative even for those temporarily who wants to quit smoking or chewing, both. Basically in India we should be focusing more on chewing tobacco rather than smoke tobacco. I think that is where we fall into the trap of Western. West can do, they have done with legislation, they banned in flights, public places, and they have shown impact of this risk reduction, what we can call. So I think what I would end by saying that we have to, there are not enough studies on alternatives comparing the smokes, but largely the harms are due to smoked tobacco and chewing tobacco in India, where the people keep it for long hours. They sleep, keep that khenny and sleep overnight. And if that is done for 10 years, 20 years, surely 100% one is going to develop cancer. There is no, and naturally it affects, as Nimesh will talk about, mental health issues, but cardiovascular diseases are directly linked to smoking. Why I started disliking smoking, one of my very close friends in medical college, and that is where 14, 15, 16 years, when you start smoking as a, just what was discussed in college, Shaukiya Pilia ek cigarette, and at that time, naturally, you can't afford a filter cigarette, so Charminar was the cigarette, and he started using it, and he developed addiction to it. Finally, he quit when he had stenting. So that can do trick to his, but that is late. So that is where I would say, and thank you once again for inviting me for this, to sharing some of my thoughts. But I think it's something I compare with helmet use for risk reduction in for head injury on the roads. Everybody knows that you put on a helmet, fasten it, it will save you the day, your life. But people don't do that. 100 lives are lost every day on our roads. Young lives are lost because they have not put on a helmet and fastened it. India, 72% of motorized automobiles on our roads are two-wheelers. They are not four wheels. So that is something we have to do with the tobacco or nicotine also. But it's a difficult task for the, because human behavior is very big. Adult human behavior habit develops in the teens, but it goes on into the adulthood. That's the problem. So somebody who smokes at the age of 10, 12 is likely to be addicted much more than you. If you see, I think Dr. Nimesh would agree that hardly anybody at 30 years of age would start smoking and then will develop addiction. It is the teens who start smoking or start using tobacco or whatever, and then they develop this addiction. So that is where we have to see how we can develop that kind of a culture from the families and from the peer groups, that children don't indulge in that. And that is something is very, very important. And it is smoking or tobacco is as much a problem in urban India as much in rural India. It's no less. Both it is covering. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra, for your views on this. Just a somber note. the figures of across the world emerging as of 2021, which is last year, is 8 million deaths all over the world caused by tobacco. This is annual figures. Out of them, 20,000, if you take the average, every single day. That's a very scary figure for all of us, smokers, non-smokers, curious smokers, half-curious smokers, what have you. So I just wanted to put that figure out to underline what a serious topic we're discussing today. Robert West is a professor emeritus at University College London. He has asked a very pertinent question. Why do we do research on tobacco? What is the need of doing any research on tobacco? It is primarily, according to him, to reduce harm, because you cannot control all the deaths caused by tobacco, because as all the speakers have said today, despite all the warnings, despite all that governments and civil society has done all over the years, people will still smoke, people will still chew tobacco. You can't really stop them, that's human nature, and that there you have it. There's also the constitutional question. Liberal democracies, or democracies like India all over the world, have this question of privacy, they have this question of the right to choose, especially in the West, in countries like America. This is very important about a person's right to choose. And even if the government wants to shut this down, does a person have the right to ruin his or her own life? Liberal democracies tend to go that way. On that particular question, I would like to invite our next speaker. But before I introduce my next speaker, I would like to assure everybody who I couldn't get to in the first session, participants who want to say their piece, ask questions, that I will get to all of you. Please give me some time, indulge me, and I'll come to you one by one. Also with the rider that please do not exceed the time limit. I think 2.5 minutes for everyone who wants to speak is more than enough. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is an eminent lawyer. He's managing partner of Bhasin and Company. Please welcome on the dais, Lalit Bhasin. Sir, would you please come and give us your remarks? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Very eminent panelists here, Dr. Mishra, Mr. Nimesh Desai, Professor Bijon Kumar Mishra, and very distinguished, eminent participants here. I think I was the wrong choice for this very important discussion, for the reason that I don't smoke, I don't drink. So personally speaking, I don't know what are the hazards of smoking or excessive drinking. Possibly it could be, as so many medical experts are here, they could say that could be a reason that why at the age of 83, 84, after completing 6 decades in the legal practice, that I'm still active, and active not only appearing in the courts, but almost in all aspects. But then at the same time, I have, you see, a very sad experience that I lost my wife to cancer, and she was also not a smoker, not a drinker, not even a captive smoker, because I don't smoke. But she died of cancer, lung cancer. So I don't know. Experts will say, what is the interconnection between use of tobacco, and it has been highlighted in the previous session also, and cancer? Possibly there exists some evidence, substantial evidence, that smoking does cause cancer. But being a lawyer, I go by hard facts, evidence. Therefore, when this issue came up about the constitutionality of the tobacco laws, I went into, you see, the various aspects. What are the limitations on the powers of the legislature or the government as a regulator, whether they can impose such conditions. So I looked into firstly the Bible, that is the Constitution, to see what is the source of this power. And immediately I went to the very important chapter, what we call the directive principles of state policy. And Article 47 of our Constitution. What is the duty of the state? And it's important. I'll tell you why. First, let me read it. Duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and the standard of living. The state shall regard the raising of the level of nutrition and the standard of living of its people and the improvement of public health as among its primary duties, and in particular, now this is important, because I'm making a comparison between liquor use and smoking. And just see what the Constitution says. And in particular, the state shall endeavor to bring about prohibition of the consumption, except for medicinal purposes, of intoxicating drinks and of the drugs which are injurious to health. So there is a clear directive given to the state that so far as the use of intoxicating drinks that is concerned, there should be prohibition. But is there a prohibition? There is no prohibition. Some states tried to impose it. They had to withdraw it because it led to illicit manufacture, import, and all those things. We have liquor consumption, as someone also rightly said. You have the surrogate advertising also going on, because directly you can't advertise liquor. But what I want to point out is that there is no direct reference here to the use of tobacco. Liquor is allowed, and it is a known fact, admitted fact, based on hard evidence, that excessive use of liquor is also injurious to health. Therefore, what is required? I don't think regulations are required. Regulations tend to be counterproductive because they bring in new regulators who would thrive if there is a prohibition or a total banning of cigarettes. There will be smuggling, which is still there, of the foreign brands. Therefore, what is the other aspect of the constitutionality? This is on the logical thing, that is what the Constitution prescribes. Now kindly see, the Constitution has divided legislative activities between the center and the states. That is covered under the 7th schedule of our Constitution. List 1 is the union list, where the government can make, with the parliament can make legislations. Second list is the state list, where the states can make their respective laws. Third is the concurrent list. And what does, you see, the schedule say? Schedule, the union list. Union list refers to that Parliament can frame a law to control any activity. It does not specify which activity, but it can, which in the opinion of the Parliament is in public interest to do so, so they can bring in any law to control that. Essential word is the control. And that is again how it has been interpreted. The same schedule says that the industries, the control of which by the union is declared by Parliament by law to be expedient in public interest. That means you can carry on with the industries which the government feels, the legislature feels should be controlled. Now, control does not mean banning. Control does not mean destroying, damaging, completely taking away the activity. Control means regulate, impose terms and conditions. But you can't ban that activity because the Constitution itself says that you can frame laws to govern those industries. And the states are required in the state list. Duties of excise, this is very important. Duties of excise on tobacco and other goods manufactured or produced in India. So there is a constitutional sanctity given to the activity of tobacco industry. That yes, you can impose excise, the union can impose excise, state can impose excise, but you cannot do away with that. Because that is empowered, you see, the parliament and the legislature is empowered to bring in laws where they can levy excise on tobacco, specifically mentioned, as against liquor and all that. For liquor it is prohibition. For tobacco it is regulation. Impose excise duties, impose this law, impose other things, you see. And then public health and all comes under the state list. It does not come under the central list. State list is public health, sanitation, hospitals and dispensaries. Therefore, constitutionality of a law has to be seen in the context of the source of power. What is the source of power to the parliament to bring in a law completely banning e-cigarettes? I'm on that limited issue. E-cigarettes cannot be banned because there is no power given to the legislature to ban that. Power is only given to control. They can control, and control means, as COTPA, this act, the cigarettes and other tobacco, it does not ban use of tobacco. It regulates use of tobacco. It gives legal sanctity to use of tobacco. Okay, there are conditions imposed in the licenses which are given. You will not sell these to the minors and to the students, and you will not sell cigarettes near some schools, and all those conditions are there. So you can impose conditions, but you can't ban the activity. It can be regulated. Therefore, regulations again would be challenged. So what is the way out? As Mr. Ashok Arora, my learned friend from the profession, we thought that his remarks are not on the subject, on the topic, but he said very important things. You have to inculcate that, you see, in the family cultures. Okay, this thing is bad, this thing is good. You have to do that. There has to be a change in the mindset of our young people, particularly in the students, and to wean away. Now, what is the evidence available? Because as a lawyer, I go only by evidence. I don't go, you see, by, okay, what are the impressions of people? Evidence, as I see it, and I've written on that also, that e-cigarettes are 95% less harmful than tobacco cigarettes. As a layman, I could understand whatever I read from the US FDA reports or the UK Parliament House of Commons committee's reports, that it is 95% less harmful than tobacco. So I'm not going into that area. It may lead to, because it's a presumption, that the use of e-cigarette may lead to use of cigarettes and all that. I don't believe, as a lawyer, I don't, you see, take those things. These are all presumptions unless we have hard evidence, hard facts to prove that. It is not acceptable to any rational thinking person to say that it is either more harmful or not 50% less harmful. I don't know. But definitely preponderance of evidence suggests that it is less harmful. Whether people will take both e-cigarettes also and the tobacco cigarettes also, that again is a presumption, an area where we cannot go into, because that all depends on habits. In my own case, my father was a chain smoker. My brother smokes. My father used to enjoy his drink in the evening. I don't drink. But it is all a question of one's mindset. I was never induced by the fact that my father is smoking and he smokes cigars and all that. I should also do that. No. We were not taught, you see, to just blindly follow anything. Therefore, self-regulation seems to be the only answer, and banning a product is actually welcoming the product. Because people would think, why a product is banned? Okay, if I can't get it from India, let us get it, you see, through some other route, illegal route, which hurts the economy also. Tobacco production is very important part of our economy. The plantations are there. Lives of millions of people are dependent upon tobacco use. So by all means, regulate the use to minimize the health hazards, but don't try to ban it because it will be counterproductive. And e-cigarettes seem to be a better way of regulating things than completely banning them. This is the first law that I have seen that where they say where the control has been exercised to ban e-cigarettes. When you allow Kotpa, the hard tobacco, which is, you are allowing the use, you see, of hard tobacco. But e-cigarettes, you are saying we are banning them? Because children will, you see, develop that habit. Well, children can develop the habit that, if you say so, by having chewing gum also. And you may say, okay, chewing of these gums will also lead to chewing of some other things, some other drugs. This is hardly anything. And it is just like banning beer while allowing the whiskey part of it, the liquor part of it. You ban beer. Can you do so legally? You cannot. But you ban beer, but you allow the use of hard liquor. This is the comparison. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhasin. Very interesting. Very interesting. I have so many questions. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time today, so I'm going to hold back and catch you after the event. Like I said before, I will come to our participants, and I think this is the perfect time to come to our participants. Before I introduce the other two speakers, we'll take this little interlude for interactive sessions. I have many names on my list: Dr. D.C. Katoch, former advisor Ayush; Dr. Sunil Raheja, former MSGB Pant Hospital; Raj Dubey, managing partner of Dubey & Partners; Dr. Jaya Thakur, and Dr. Sapna Bansal, just to name a few. So I'm going to go one by one. And I'm going to ask you to please keep it to 2 minutes, whether it's in an intervention or a question to any of our panelists, like Mr. Bhasin or Dr. Mishra. If you heard something that was interesting in their speech, please go ahead and ask the question, but please keep it to 2.5 minutes maximum, starting with Dr. D.C. Katoch. Is he around? Yes, Dr. Katoch, please. Can we give him the mic, please? Yeah.
Thank you. I would just refer to 15th century. In 15th century, when Christopher Columbus was about to move on the sea journey, by the Native Americans, tobacco was offered to him. Why? Did you ever ponder over this? Why this was given? Tobacco was given to them? Now, coming to the point, now tobacco has many medicinal uses. Very good therapeutic effects. When I was student, about 10 or 12 years old, whenever I used to go to my parents, my grandparents in Himachal, my grandfather, he was hookah smoker. He was a hookah smoker. And whenever I used to get any wound over the legs, he put hookah water in that, and immediately it will go away. And the inflammation goes away. Earache. the drops of hookah water are put in the ear, and the earache goes away. And there are, in the medical history, there are reports that this tobacco, it is a very good antidote for scorpion bite. Many things are there. Good for pain, good for inflammation, good for so many other things. Now, if you see our Drugs and Cosmetic Act, I think the first tobacco control order, when it came, it has been totally removed. Means tobacco as addiction, tobacco as a bad habit or other things. There are other things also. Other aspects of the tobacco use, those also need to be. We are talking about the nicotine content. The gentleman pointed out that the nicotine content, that is important. Can we reduce the nicotine content in the tobacco and then make it usable? Or the therapeutic uses of tobacco. So for all these things, I think the regulations are
Right.
regulated use of tobacco. The point Mr. Bhasin made, I think that is very.
Do you have a specific question for the panel?
No, I am not having
Okay.
any specific questions.
Okay.
But I just want to give my thoughts that how this tobacco for the beneficial. Means we are talking about tobacco harm, tobacco risk regulation.
Right.
What about the regulation of the tobacco benefits?
All right. Sir,
Medicinal benefits.
like I said, we'll keep it brief. Thank you, Dr. Katoj. Dr. Sunil Reheja is also a participant today. Dr. Sunil Reheja, again, I'll request you to please be brief if you can. I'll give you the mic. Please stay on your spot. We'll get you the mic. Right here, sir. Right here. Yeah. You can sit there and say.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me here. And I will speak what you said before. I will say that tobacco harms your body from toe to bottom. If you see graying of hair, wrinkling of face, smoker's lips, then cancer of the mouth, larynx, lungs. Lung cancer is 90% patients are because of the tobacco. And the chances of lung cancer is 23 times more in smokers. Dr. Khilnani will agree with me. So if you see, the chances of CAD is 2 to 4 times more. Heart attack, the chances of stroke is 2 to 4 times more. Increase in blood pressure, pulse rate, acidity, cancer of the stomach, urinary bladder, pancreas. So all these incidents are more. Besides that, as Madam said, infertility, decreased IUGR, then premature delivery, then erectile dysfunction in men's. And besides this, there are studies, dysfunction of the sperms also, because of which we are getting more genetic disorders also. So then Burgess disease. So it can affect from top to bottom, and I have been the part of Delhi University Smoke Free Initiative. We need to touch the youngsters, teenagers, school going, because it has been seen they are more prone to smoking, and once they start using tobacco, it becomes their lifetime habit. So this is the place we have to really hit hard and hit early. And I think the tobacco companies are also working on these otherwise. So we have to think on that. Besides this, we have to see the moment the person will stop smoking, using tobacco, the benefit will start immediately. The blood pressure comes down, heart rate comes down, the chances of heart attack comes down, COPD, asthma chances come down. So all these things you have to tell the people that it may take couple of days, months and a year when you will feel good. And we should also focus on yoga, meditation, exercise, music, singing, dancing, other psychological aspect of the public, because public involvement is very important. Nothing can succeed without people's involvement
Right.
and awareness. So awareness we are doing, but we have to at the same time make them a part of our team. As we know, this year, the theme of the World No Tobacco Day is poisoning our planet. And it goes beyond harming the humans, because it says tobacco is killing us and our planet, that is environment. So as earlier we have said, it kills more than 8 million people in a year. So at the same time, we have to see the consumption of tobacco, the use of tobacco is affecting our environment also. If you see the cigarette butts, the tendu leaves, beedi butts lying here and there, isn't it? So at the same time, growing the tobacco crop has a lot of side effect on the,
So
on the
respectfully, I'll ask
environment.
you to wind up.
So
There are other speakers
we have
as
to
well.
think of the first-hand smoking, second-hand smoking, third-hand smoking. The person who is smoking is maybe using a filtered cigarette. He is harming himself, but the other person sitting who is non-smoker in the same chamber maybe is smoking more than 30 types of brands.
Right, Dr.
So,
Raheja, I'd like to
and
ask
third
you
hand is
to
once they
wind up,
leave.
please.
And we have to see the smoking increases stress actually because it increases your blood pressure and heart rate.
Right, we have
At
to
the
move on to the
same
next
time-
speaker. Dr. Raheja, I'll have to
Yeah,
ask you
yeah.
to wind up, please.
Hookah is more harmful than cigarette, and isn't it? And BD is also more harmful than cigarettes. So we have to see, we have to make these basic correction for the people. Some of the patients say, sir, मैं तो hookah पीता हूँ, मुझे क्या नुकसान होगा? अरे hookah is 100 times more harmful.
Right, sir. I'll have to ask you to stop.
thank you so much for your- yeah,
Thank you so
okay,
much.
thank
you
you.
so much. Again, I'll have to ask everyone who speaks now to keep to 2.5 minutes. I will have to interrupt you otherwise. I know it's not polite. I know it's rude, but that's my job today. So please indulge me. Raj Dubey, managing partner of Dubey and Partners. He will speak or wants to speak on the alternative use of tobacco. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. Basin sir, it was nice seeing you once again. I've been your younger colleague relatively. I run the law firm Dubey and Partners. We are into international financial structuring. So I travel a lot. I get less a chance to be here. But I'm here. I know you since the days of DC Singhania. I worked with him. So thank you. Coming back to the topic, look, everybody has criticized tobacco. Let me give the another aspect. There's a huge work going on in central Italy and in the western part of Italy since 2008, where they're working on the alternative use of tobacco. And you know what is the finding? The seeds of tobacco has the same oil contents of the mustard seeds, 40% almost, 38 to 41%. And that could be a great source of biodiesel. They're working on it. Same, the remains out of that becomes protein cake. And that is added to the animal feeds. So Europe is working on alternative use of tobacco, as we discussed and somebody said. It's nicotine part, which hurts. But with the, slight change and, amendments, if you allow biodiversity, then the nicotine content could also be changed, right? And that could make it lesser harmful.
So you're saying basically
Right.
that tobacco companies have to spend a little more money on R&D and then
That's
perhaps
it.
implement
That's
That's
it.
never going to happen, sir.
No,
That is
what I'm
not
saying
going to
is,
happen.
frankly speaking, what I'm saying is, do not penalize farmers. Do not penalize farmers. They deserve a better dealing by Government of India and others by putting their product to a better use, like ethanol. If you are talking about ethanol today, same could be that.
Right.
So please look for that,
Absolutely.
and the regulator should look into that aspect as well.
Again,
That's the only
like I said, Dr. Bijon Kumar Mishra knows you learn a new thing every day. I did not know that. Thank you, Raj Dubey,
Thank you.
for
Thank you,
that
sir.
intervention. Very quickly, Dr. Jaya Thakur, Dr. Jaya Thakur, can we get the mic to Dr. Jaya Thakur right there? Yes. Dr. Thakur, again, I'll have to ask you to be brief, please.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Myself, Dr. Jaya Thakur, as he said, I work as a dentist and I see so many mouth disease, pyorrhea and gum-related disease. It's so much in labor class. It's very unfortunate we are sitting here and discussing this, but those who want to know this, they are not there and they don't get to listen this. and they don't get opportunity to know the how harmful are that. You nowadays a very famous ad, Vimal Pan Masala, you have all seen. 3 superheroes are there in 1 rupee Vimal Pan Masala ad. I don't get it. What kind of advertisement is these nowadays? Matlab, a labor class who study only 5 to 6 class only, they don't get anything about they don't know, they don't get educated that much that they don't know, they know what is good or bad. But if they see in the TVs or that this my hero, superhero Akshay Kumar is using this, is using Vimal Pan Masala, so I should try it. Same as the students, young students who are in 9th or 10th class, they don't know about the life or harmfulness, but they use, I remember as I was a kid, so my mostly my classmates are start using cigarettes at 9th class, and they do like this in front of us to just impress us. But we should try to give awareness in school going children and in labor class.
Right.
And one more thing I feel that we should do something about to treat them, because in clinics it's very difficult to treat them in pyrrhia, or because of pyrrhia they lose tooth, and it's very difficult to replace them because in AIIMS they don't get appointments, and in private clinics they don't get
Right.
afford it. So it's my request, we should do about the treating those people who are addicted
Right.
and tooth loss.
Well,
Thank you so
we
much.
take your point fairly. A larger part about people who are in public office or public. I have a larger responsibility, perhaps, not to endorse this. I think one last intervention before I come to you, sir, because you've been very patient, and I thank you for your patience. Dr. Sapna Bansal, she's a professor in Delhi University. Very quickly, ma'am. Again, I'll have to tell you, 2 minutes, not more. Thank you.
Very good afternoon, one and all present here. It's a very important topic we are discussing here. She's saying absolutely right. Those people should know about this topic. They are not at all able to understand and not ready to accept anything. See, unfortunately, I just want to discuss you one case. I mean, it was happened before 1 month back. My daughter-in-law my sister-in-law have a son. Is approximately 7 years old. So 1 month before his birthday was this. So he told me, I want to join you. I want to purchase something. I asked him, do you like a chocolate? He said, no, I will join you and will purchase the things along with you. I said, okay, come and join me. You won't believe it. He was saying, I'm interested to purchase Jova Kesri because it's a matter of choice, because we people, what we are producing 7-year-old children that, they are very much efficient and attracted by the advertisement. So now this is the situation of our children.
Right.
And very unfortunate. We need to find the best solution, because only few people, they think like that, will discuss over here and the problem will solve. I'm sorry to say this thing, but this time cigarette consumption taking much more than before. And even, I'm sorry to say once again, then most of the girls and women, they are addicted these days. And I've been there 15 days before in Manali, and I'm shocked to see, the girl who's just 12 years, 14 years, they was consuming all these things, and they was feeling so proud. And they feel like that. Oh, so, my concern about the generation of our society, my concern about this incredible India, that what we are and where we are going.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bansal. I think it's time now to go back to our keynote speakers. Whoever's left, and I have all the names here, don't worry, I'll make sure that in the interludes between speakers, I somehow managed to fit your questions and your interventions in. Don't worry about that. Our next keynote speaker is a psychiatrist. Dr. Nimesh Desai will give us his words, and we'll save the best for last. Professor Mishra will be the last keynote speaker. But first, one more round of applause for Dr. Nimesh Desai.
Professor Hegar. That's all. That's all right. Thanks, Al. Thank you. Thank you, the organizers, Policy Circle, I think the Nair couple, and everybody else on the team, and of course, Mr. Atta Khan, who I think is doing a beautiful job this morning. I think the last two speakers emphasized something very crucial that I'm going to come to, and what's been alluded to, the need to help those who are already addicted, and need for treatment services in addition to awareness. But before I come to that, let me begin, if you'll permit, with a bit of a journey over the last 40 years that will bring to the points that I want to make, only the key points that I want to make. It was in the 1980s, after my psychiatry qualification at NIMHANS on the faculty, that we started working on alcohol drug abuse treatment prevention programs. And I realized individually that tobacco did not figure in the list of alcohol and drug abuse treatment prevention programs. Nobody bothered about tobacco. I was somehow interested in what is happening in the West about tobacco prevention and treatment. And allow me to also recall, 87 World Conference on Tobacco and Health, world or global, I think World Conference on Tobacco and Health. The then DG WHO headquarters, Havden Meder, in his inaugural said, and I'm almost quoting, I can't be sure if the exact quote, but paraphrase that. He said the smoking rates have already started coming down in the West, and the countries of the third world better beware, next few decades the market is going to attack you. And I was so struck by what DG WHO said at that World Congress, and that seems to have happened in the last few decades, especially about women, addressing women, addressing youngsters. So there is the issue of market that I don't think I heard since the morning at all. The entire marketing industry and what happened in the US with tobacco industry. As part of my public health training at Hopkins, which was the fulcrum for bringing out all these skeletons out of the tobacco companies' files, I've learned a lot about that, and please be sure what we are discussing since the morning is a very complex issue of human behavior that we psychiatrists and mental health professionals claim to understand. I don't think we do. We claim to understand, we try and study it. But there is the whole issue of market that we can't overlook. Come back to my recap. In the 1990s on the AIMS faculty that Dr. Khilnani and some of us were together, Mishra Saab and us, I began to see again as part of the Drug Abuse Treatment Center of AIMS, which became the National Center later, I began to come across, I began to come across colleagues, faculty colleagues, their family members, junior and senior residents who had tobacco dependence, and there was no treatment available. In the 90s, of course, there was only the non-specific use of benzodiazepines or counseling, some behavioral techniques, and fluoxetine, if you could use as a craving suppressant. Fortunately, around the turn of the century, a lot of treatment methods have become available. Psychological, behavioral, and pharmacological. And so 2001 is when we, in that corner in Shadra, the Institute of Human Behavioral and Life Sciences, you'll be happy to know, we started the first tobacco cessation clinic at IBAS in 2001. And 2002 is when the WHO country office came up with what is now a big network. There is actually, ma'am, a big network of tobacco cessation clinic, government funded as well as in the private sector across the country, across states. So if you come across people, especially in the lower strata, who require treatment, please be sure, look up TCC, refer to them. TCC networks are available. Come back to the larger issues of regulation, tobacco control. The other thing I want to avoid by now, is this controversy about vaping and the ban. Dr. Khilnani is a very respected colleague, so is Shanath Reddy, and that committee that they must have. But I'm not for total ban on vape. I'll make my position clear about that. Bijon and we have been on many platforms together, mainly on the issue of evidence being inconclusive. Second, consumer rights. Consumer rights not just for the client, but also for the provider. If I, as a treatment provider for tobacco cessation, if I don't have the spectrum of things to offer, that's a bit of a problem. And I think Bhasin Saab made such an exquisite, eloquent thing about the legal constitution aspects of that. Just a few summary points to, as I've understood in the last 40 years, having delved into this a lot. Like Dr. Mishra, sir, my colleague said, please understand, there have been over the last at least 56 years, post-World War more than earlier, science effort at modifying group behavior, especially when it comes to personal health behavior. And the one thing that has succeeded is risk to the others, what is called in insurance terms passive risk. And I learned in the 80s and 90s that in health terms, it also got translated to passive risk. Allow me to recap this quickly. 1964, the Surgeon General of US came with irrefutable evidence that bronchogenic carcinoma was linked to smoking. Irrefutable. Nothing happened for 20 years. It was 1984 JAMA that the first robust evidence on passive smoking came up. And then things changed immediately. So what happened in the 80s and 90s, please recall for those of us who lived through that or those who might have studied, if young colleagues, it's the issue of you may do whatever you like, don't risk my health. Smokers' rights versus non-smokers' rights. HIV, same. So there are two areas where we have succeeded, please understand. Now here is the major point. The areas where we have not succeeded. Alcohol, illegal drugs. Because there is no passive risk involved. Except for one small niche, if you want to understand, campaigns against drunken driving succeed because there is again the element of passive risk. You can't drink and drive and endanger my life or safety. But drinking in general, alcohol prevention doesn't work through passive smoking. Passive risk, right? So what we'll have to realize is, like everybody has said in the morning, regulation, some amount of regulation, laws, but social awareness mainly about my right versus your right. What seems to work is only that. And that has worked very well, reasonably well, except for these dangers of market. You see, like it was said for tobacco, and I think Adar was trying to ask you jocularly, see, once I have a factory and I'm producing something, if you reduce the consumption in this area, what do I do? Like Havdan Mallar said in 87, I turn my marketing strategy here. If it doesn't work in this room, I turn it somewhere else. So how are we going to counter the marketing strategy vis-a-vis, human behavior tendencies, which can never be completely controlled when it comes to personal behavior? Let's face it. I'm repeating myself. The only major principle that works in modifying or regulating or controlling personal human behavior about health is the idea of passive risk. That's the only thing that has worked in the field of health behavior. Everything else has very limited area. I will say one more time that treatment has been like chewing has been a blind spot relatively. I'm happy about the fact that a lot of people since the morning here have at least spoken about what I think has been a huge blind spot. And to that, we have no solution, especially because there is no concept of passive risk involved. Will you ever be able to come up with something about oral chewed tobacco that can say you can't chew because you're affecting my health? Unlikely. And so, unfortunately, because of socio-cultural issues, marketing issues, and this aspect of personal behavior, we are on the brink of a major epidemic of chewed tobacco problems, not so much the smoking. So let's stop aping the West about smoking issues. I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Desai. You, of course, caught my attention with your points. I hope it was the same with all the participants. Just a tidbit out there for you. This particular proceeding, this particular event, at any point today was being watched live online by 1,000+ people. That was the figure I got about half an hour ago. We can check the latest figure. I'm sure it's gone up. I can tell you I've worked in a little bit in television, so has Anil. At any given point in time, the programs that they advertise are their best programs, maybe 500 people watch them. Dr. Bijon Mishra will bear me out here. And right now, this online streaming, 1,000+ people have already watched, and more people probably are joining in. Just wanted to put that out there. We have our last keynote speaker today, dear old friend, and an expert in his field, international consumer policy. Dr. Bijon Kumar Mishra is our next speaker, and we'll take more questions after his speech. Thank you. And please give a round of applause to Dr. Mishra.
Athar, lovely meeting you after a long gap. Namaskar. A smile on the face. Don't look serious. We're going to talk something which is going to be for all of us. We are all consumers. Thanks, Anil, Sajna. Hey, Sajna. Hi. Kamal ka kaam kiye ho tum. Very good. Very good work. You know, you got me taking back to 1987. Lalitji, 1987, before Justice Iradi. Will you recall?
Yeah.
Justice Iradi was the president of the National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. The Consumer Protection Act came into effect in 1986. Bihar was the first state to implement the Consumer Protection Act in 1987. And I happened to be the first one to go before the State Commission, where I went before Federal Bank of India because they went into a writing strike where I had an account.
I appeared for the bank. That was my first case.
And you will remember,
And we
I was lonely standing there, and you had a battery of people with huge books quoting huge, kind of orders. And I was against him because he was contesting, because I had got a compensation from the State Commission for the irresponsible behavior of the bank, and he was protecting the bank that it was not irresponsible, it was uncalled for, we couldn't help it, it was unforeseen, and all these kind of, jargon. Lalitji, what a wonderful reunion.
Yeah.
Nice to.
Good to see.
Yes. Bijon Kumar Mishra versus Federal Bank of India. I have a reference to that. The first case which came before the National Commission. Friends, I've been listening very carefully from the morning. And as I said, Dr. Saab ko to koi kabhi bhul hi nahi sakta hai. You can't do without the medical practitioners. You have to go to them. Kuch bhi ho, they are like our God. Kuch bhi ho. Huh?
Especially if they use tobacco.
Yeah, and even if you don't use, they always have a knack to tell you, ये टेस्ट करके लाओ पहले, फिर तुमको बताएंगे कि तुम्हारा क्या क्या गलतियां हैं. हम आपको नहीं विश्वास करेंगे, हम अपना रेडियोलॉजिस्ट को विश्वास करेंगे, हमारा पैथोलॉजिस्ट को विश्वास करेंगे. Thanks to Consumer Protection Act again. My good friends of the medical profession called me and said, बहुत अच्छा काम किए जो एक्ट ले आए. हम बोले क्यों? हमारा इनकम 4 गुना बढ़ गया. So my contention is, you see what happens when you force something on people. And I want to start with, as I'm told by the organizers, I'm supposed to catch on the rights of the consumers, right? So 1986 में कानून आया officially, and we had a very dynamic prime minister that time, let me tell you. When I approached him, he said, 10 चीज मत मांगो, एक चीज मांगो, कोई भी एक चीज मांगो. हम बोले कि सर खाली एक ही चीज चाहिए, कंज्यूमर को एक कानूनी रूप दे दीजिए. Give the consumer a legal face, a legal right. We have got 34 laws in the country protecting the consumers, but they are not protecting the consumers, they are protecting the Inspector Raj. They are pushing people to pay fine, डरा के, धमका के, उनके inspection, raid, फराना, consumer बेचारा वहीं का वहीं. So I convinced the Prime Minister that we need a law which will protect the consumer. And he immediately called H.K.L. Bhagat that time, he was the minister, तुरंत उनको बुलाए और बोले 6 महीने में ये कानून बननी चाहिए. He was such a dynamic Prime Minister. Young, energetic, अरे और कौन हो सकता है यार? तुम नाम क्यों फिर गड़बड़ हो जाएगा, लाइव हो रहा है. So what I want to tell you people is very simple. You see, you got your rights in 1986. What were those rights? 1986 का चल नहीं सकता ज़्यादा दिन तक, तो 2019 में नया लॉ आ गया, the Modi law, Consumer Protection Act. मोदी रिजीम का कंज्यूमर प्रोटेक्शन एक्ट 2019 में आया, 2020 में रूल्स बन गया, वो अब चलने लग गए. क्या रूल्स? क्या laws बना? The right to be protected against marketing of goods, products or services which are hazardous to life and property. सुबह से सुन रहे हैं. And the right to be informed about the quality, quantity, potency, purity, standard and price of the goods, products or services as the case may be, so as to protect the consumer against unfair trade practice. The right to be assured wherever possible access to a variety of goods, products or services at competitive prices, the right to be heard and to be assured that consumers' interest will receive due consideration at appropriate fora, the right to seek redressal against unfair trade practice or restrictive trade practices or unscrupulous exploitation of consumers, and the right to consumer awareness. ये 6 right जो आया, yeah, I'll try. Because after 7 minutes, Athar, nobody listens to you. So, what I want to tell you all today, friends, is that the debate is you bring in regulations to develop standards. You don't bring in regulations to debar or deny people in terms of accessibility of a product or a service. तो ताली तो बनता है.
Simple as that.
ताली तो
Simple as
बनता
that.
है, boss.
Very true. Absolutely.
ताली तो बनता है क्योंकि you see we forget our rights. Our right is what? हमको choice चाहिए. तुम कौन हो बोलने वाले? हमारे पैसे हैं. हम पेमेंट कर रहे हैं. हम सब जानते हैं जो आप छाप रहे हो, बता रहे हो, हमको सिखा रहे हो, हमको अवेयर कर रहे हो, हम सब जानते हैं और फिर भी हम करते हैं. तुम कौन हो रोकने वाले? So the law should be enabling. You see, सबसे मजेदार चीज क्या हुआ? हम लास्ट में आए, जो हम बोलना चाह रहे थे, ललित जी सब बता दिए. सब लोग बता दिए. इतना बढ़िया कर दिए ना ललित जी. आप क्या बताएं आप? इतना मजा आया. गजल सुन रहे थे जब when you were speaking. It was wonderful. What I wanted to tell you all is that he has given the constitutional aspects and everything he has explained. Now, what I will say is, as a commoner, like you and me, I know tobacco is a legitimate product. You are selling it legitimately. It's been distributed in a legitimate manner. It all got derived out of a exercise which happened globally, which is known as Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. 2000 से लेकर 2004 तक हर साल 6 टाइम हम जिनीवा जाते थे. कौन नहीं चाहता है जिनीवा जाए? इतना ब्यूटीफुल अपॉर्चुनिटी. लेकिन इतने मेहनत की है हम लोग 4 साल. क्या मेहनत? अमेरिका, क्यूबा, कई कंट्रीज इसको होने नहीं देना चाह रहे थे. क्यों? क्योंकि उनका कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल राइट्स के विरोध में था. एंड इंडिया वाज द फ्रंट रनर. हमारा भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में है, लेकिन वी वर द फ्रंट रनर टू टॉक अबाउट हेल्थ एंड सेफ्टी ऑफ द कंज्यूमर. हमारे कंज्यूमर्स इंटरनेशनल जो इंटरनेशनल बॉडी है, उसके एनुअल सेशन में हम जब रेजोल्यूशंस डाले कि वी शुड पार्टिसिपेट इन द फ्रेमवर्क कन्वेंशन ऑन टोबैको कंट्रोल, लोग ऑब्जेक्ट करने लगे. कंज्यूमर्स कहने लगे, बड़े बड़े नेता हैं जो वर्ल्ड के कंज्यूमर्स के, ओके, व्हाई आर यू इन्फ्रिंजिंग ऑन माय राइट्स? I have a choice. Who are you to tell me whether I smoke in my house or I don't smoke in my house or I smoke in some place or the other? Who are you to tell me? Don't infringe on my rights. हम लोग वोटिंग डाले एनुअल जनरल बॉडी मीटिंग में, वोट की उस रेजोल्यूशन में. हम बोले लेट्स पुट इट ऑन वोट, लेट्स सी कितने फेवर में है, कितने अगेंस्ट में है. जीत गए. क्योंकि व्हेन द चिप्स आर डाउन, कोई नहीं दिखाना चाहता है कि हम कंज्यूमर के हेल्थ के अगेंस्ट में हैं. The issue is that nobody can say that tobacco is not harmful, tobacco doesn't kill. सारे डेटा है. लेकिन ये जानते हुए भी, we all believe that you cannot infringe on my choice, you cannot infringe on my freedom for choice, because it is me who is paying money to access that. You have to give me full information, credible information, evidence-based information. आप जैसे लॉयर एविडेंस खोजते हो, we as consumers also look for evidence. Evidence from whom? नॉट टॉम डिक एंड हैरी की किसी को स्पॉन्सर कर दिया, एक स्टडी बना दिया, ना ना ना, फ्रॉम न्यूट्रल credible organizations who are known to give good scientific study. We believe in that. और उसको लेकर बैठते हैं हम लोग negotiation में, उस studies को लेकर हम लोग negotiation में बैठते हैं. We don't go with emotions when we talk scientific studies. So friends, my question is, you ban a product, और इस पर हम elaborate नहीं करना चाहेंगे क्योंकि sufficiently ललित जी ने समझा दिया है कि it was अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल. हम ये कतई नहीं मानेंगे कि आप कुछ भी भला सोच लो हमारे लिए, आप कौन हो बैन करने के लिए. दैट लॉ, उसको क्या बोलता है, द लॉ विच सेज द प्रोविजन ऑफ इलेक्ट्रॉनिक सिगरेट्स प्रोडक्शन, मैन्युफैक्चर, इंपोर्ट, एक्सपोर्ट, ट्रांसपोर्ट, सेल, डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, स्टोरेज एंड एडवर्टाइजमेंट एक्ट ऑफ 2019, इसको रिविजिट करना अनिवार्य है, अनिवार्य है. यदि सरकार नहीं करेंगे तो पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट तो करना ही पड़ेगा. इसके अलावा कोई चारा तो है ही नहीं, क्योंकि हम तो बोल रहे हैं कि आप करो. हम चाहते हैं कि आप सुन लो मेरी बात. नहीं सुनना चाहेंगे तो नेचुरली वी विल हैव टू लुक फॉर अ लीगल वे टू अप्रोच इट. And what I am trying to convey today is, we all must agree to one fact. And please, for heaven's sake, keep demanding that. And I will close there, saying that you have a right to your safety, you have a right to credible information, you have a right to informed choice. Nobody can take away those rights from you, and please do not allow anybody to take away those rights from you, because you are the person who is paying not only to buy that product, but you are the person who is paying the taxes to govern the country. Thank you very much.
Bijon Kumar Mishra and his... Thank you so much, sir. I mean, that's an unfair question to ask me because I've known you for a very long time. And thank you for speaking. I will come back to our participants, and if there are any questions left, I'll come to them as well. Before I do that, correct me if I'm wrong, Dada, the perception of harm, quote unquote, from e-cigarettes is going up apparently, but the evidence seemingly has moved in the opposite direction. There is no hardcore evidence to suggest that harm reduction is not the main thing as far as e-cigarettes or alternative delivery systems are concerned. Now, when I was doing my research for today, I came across many articles, many viewpoints. There was a conference last year in London on e-cigarettes, and they had some pretty choice words for not just the WHO, but also other people who fund these programs. A program called Empower that the WHO has going on right now. It's funded completely, entirely by the Michael Bloomberg Philanthropic Foundation. And it's hard not to think that if a person's ideology cannot seep into the project he's funding. That, of course, is a very contentious issue. I would not like to go into that, maybe not today, but would you agree with that very quickly?
No, you see, the point which I want to make is, as I said, just now today in the morning I read a study which came out from Hong Kong, where it has shown that the smoking reduced in Hong Kong by 9%. However, the consumption of e-cigarettes went up. So what does it reflect? It shows that you are giving alternatives and options to consumers to make an informed choice, based on which people are making an informed choice and be able to get away from the addiction. And let me tell you, it's not habit. I always say a smoker or a tobacco addict is a chronic disease. It's a chronic disease. We need to treat them. We need to take care of them. We need to counsel them. We need to give them a direction. Like, you know, when you have hypertension, you have diabetes, you go to a medical practitioner for what? To get treated so that it doesn't aggravate, so that it doesn't lead you to a place where you can become a victim of immature death. So what happens is, you need to look at yourself to get treated.
if you are addicted.
On the different side of that coin, Dr. Desai, I'd like to ask you a very two-line answer briefly, because I have to come back to our participants as well. Is that possibly because the lack of awareness also stems, Dr. Desai, from the fact that public funds used for studies like this, the results of those publicly funded studies are not really reaching the public? Or in other words, the lack of awareness is so acute that public money being used for such funds is not really, is going up in smoke? Excuse the pun, but it's going up in smoke.
Yes, science driving policy is a difficult goal that every nation tries to achieve to varying degrees, and our country is still somewhere little lower down on that. Science driving policy rather than extremism. But the important point there, my friend, is the other. I'll take 2 sentences to say that, which I didn't get to say earlier. Entire field of personal and health behavior, including alcohol, drug abuse, tobacco, has one lesson in last 50 years. Pragmatism over idealism. And of course the consumer rights. And so when you look for an ideal world and you want an alcohol-free world, tobacco-free world, or you say you will only do this. The third point, which again I didn't get to say, please understand, for those of us who are not familiar, Bijonji really talks much like a treatment professional, which is wonderful. For all chemical substances, including tobacco, initiation is psychological and social. The latter part of the use career is biological mechanisms of dependence. So when a person starts using alcohol or tobacco at 16 or 18 or 25, that is psychological factors, advertising, yevo. By the time he or she becomes dependent, it's no longer psychological and social factors, it's basic dependence, as he said.
Okay.
The brain mechanisms of addiction. And so like the lady there said so well, both the ladies, they require treatment. And treatment will have to have options.
Right. All right. Let me go back to our participants. I think I have 2 more names and plus Dr. Khilnani will want to come in as well. I'll come back to you, sir. Just give me 2 minutes with Lakshman Singh Solanki. Yes. No, I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. Lakshman Singh Solanki is a former judge. I think he wants to say something. Again, respectfully, sir, I'll have to remind you, your time limit is only 2 minutes.
Of course, sir.
Thank you.
So I just listened since morning, but I think one thing which will be left. I say the persuasion is the best, and which can be added or can be included in the school curriculum, study curriculum, as a moral science or what we have been doing. So better would be, instead of banning, there should be a persuasion by way of moral learning.
Right.
So that's my suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Solanki. Murari Tiwari, Chairman, Delhi Bar Council, is he here? Yes. Please, sir, again, I have to respectfully remind you, the mic's right there. You have only 2 minutes to make your remarks. If you have a specific question for the keynote speakers, please go ahead, sir. 2 minutes, though. Thank you.
Respected Mr. Lalit Bhasin, Nimesh Desai, Bijon Mishra ji. I'm sorry I'm a little late. I got stuck in a bail matter. Otherwise, I could have been here in time.
That's important.
And that was equally important for as a lawyer. So I should share with the House that I am successor of Mr. Lalit Bhasin in Bar Council.
Oh, very good.
I am trying to carry on his legacy.
Wonderful.
So, there are 2 things which always, comes to my mind. You all are here. Why don't any government at any level, even at the world level, why don't they stop manufacturing and producing these tobaccos? I don't know why. I don't know why they don't stop. Because their only motive is to generate taxes, generate revenue, and as a government, in case I would be a minister, then I will try to stop its manufacturing only. When it has been established that it is not good for health, then why we manufacture? And thereafter, then we impose a lot of penalty, a lot of laws are imposed there. Then we go to court, then we generate another revenue, set of revenue for the government. That is the only, I think, purpose to create illusion in the society that there are laws to stop it, and we are, the government should stop it. I do not know, my elder brothers are here, they will highlight it, that why government is not intending to stop it. Then the second thing is come for persuasion. Persuasion is very important to make it self-discipline. We have to stop using these tobaccos. We have to convey the people that stop using it. We should work on that side. And I request the government by your organization that the government should take necessary steps to stop manufacturing and producing the tobaccos I am very thankful to Policy Circle, its organization, that despite being so late, you allowed me to speak. That is more important. I was not supposed to. I have shared many TV shows with. नहीं sir होता है ऐसा. And I am very thankful to Rajeshwar Jaiswal who persuaded me to participate in this function. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I briefly respond to that?
Yeah,
One
absolutely,
second.
absolutely, yeah.
I'm sure Basin Saab and a lot of other legal colleagues will. But you know what has been going on in my mind from this entire session and the previous session less is, I think, sir, with all respect, simple answer to your question. Legal constitutional provisions do not support that idea, nor does the science of human behavior support that. So this is one of those few occasions, it seems to me, where science and law are in agreement. कि भैया total stop नहीं कर सकते आप.
Just to add to that, rather the constitution permits carrying on this activity in tobacco manufacturing because it provides for imposition of excise duty when you are manufacturing tobacco. And no, it is constitutional amendment will be required. Constitutional amendment by the parliament, not the government.
As I told you, it took us 4 years to negotiate the FCTC, the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Because you can't bring a law which is imposed. You have to bring a law which is neutral, which is unbiased, which is pro all stakeholders. You see, so please try to understand and appreciate that because you are a leader in the legal profession. So I would like to plead on you that always look at the citizens' rights vis-a-vis, issues concerning health, safety. Because see, nobody can say, as I again repeating and saying, nobody can say that tobacco is unhealthy, not a good product, it should not be sold. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. Okay, but we have to find a way, we'll have to find a way how to look after the farmers, how to look after the packaging industry, how to look after everybody who was involved in the supply chain, whose livelihoods are enshrined on that.
When it has been established that it is against human being, it is not good for health, then it should be stopped.
Okay, we can continue the discussion. Suddenly this looks like a courtroom, which is Mr. Bazin is here and as well as Mr. Tiwari as well. But let me just take us slightly back in the medical direction. We have an unexpected visitor here, somebody who's doyen in the field of medical science. Dr. Mohsin Wali has just walked in unexpectedly, and Dr. Mohsin Wali, for those of you who don't know, has been physician to 3 former presidents of India, Dr. Venkat Raman, Shankar Dayal Sharma, and most recently Dr. Pranab Mukherjee. And he has walked in, and I will not let go of this chance to ask his view on what he thinks of our topic. Not just from the medical side, but also as somebody who's had life experiences for so long. Dr. Wali, your mic.
Thank you, Utter. One of the deficient aspects which I have been noting for last 50 years that all the literature talks
Dr. Wali,
about...
I'm sorry, can you come and speak from here if you don't mind, sir?
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Dr. Khilnani.
Round of applause to Dr. Wali.
Need your blessings. One of the most important neglected side of the story which I've been going through in international literature over the past is that in India, countries like in India, there's a huge consumption of chewing tobacco, which has not been much part of the research, except that the packet of the tobacco contains a picture which is invisible, not to be deciphered what it is, and that's all. The companies have come across in the last decade, before the e-cigarettes came, also with low nicotine cigarettes or cigarettes which were labeled as less dangerous, which was a totally hoax. And I was also invited to 1 or 2 seminars, and later on I came to know it was a big company which was conducting these seminars, that they are going to make low nicotine cigarettes, and that's how the market was trying to be captured, and it didn't work. So any idea for promotion of alternates like e-cigarettes, low amount of tobacco cigarettes, I would call that low amount of tobacco cigarettes, is not going to work, as has been discussed just now, that government cannot impose ban on growing, production, packaging and marketing of products related to our discussion. I would say, as a medical person, that the complications of the tobacco, just one major complication, cancer, the government is spending much more to treat these patients. The health ministry is spending more to treat this patient. And very briefly, I would submit to the audience that what was labeled as a disease of males is now becoming disease of females, that is lung cancer, 50-50. Previously, the ratio was totally dominated by males, 70-30, now it is 50-50. And much diversion of this has been taking towards the pollution. Probably smoking still remains a cause behind the scene, and it has to be curbed. And also, we have to have rehabilitation programs for the all poor farmers whose photos we see on the auto rickshaws that I am a tobacco grower. Things like that have to be done in the next 100 years, not it is a matter of decade or a year. So it has to be long-term planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wali, for gracing us with your presence and with your remarks. One last intervention that I have here in front of me. It's another doctor, Dr. Professor Sunita Gupta, the Dental College of the MAMC. Can we get her a mic, please? Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. You are the last participant who will speak today, so the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I congratulate, in fact, about the policy circle to have this kind of a platform. Having a hands-on experience about, what the esteemed guests have been talking about and discussing across, one thing which probably I wanted to bring across was tobacco-based toothpaste, which is available. And these are the toothpastes which are being, we talk about at the level where the rural, population has been really getting into. What Wali sir said about the oral cancers and the cancer part of it, which was prevalent earlier at the age of 30, 40, 50 years beyond, that is what we would consider that they would have a cancer then. We are getting children as young as 12 years, 13 years having oral cancers. The only reason is that they start using this toothpaste when they have a toothache, which has the tobacco into it. They start rubbing it. So the chemicals which leaches out, more than 236 chemicals which are carcinogenic chemicals, they directly get into the bloodstream when they start rubbing it. So there is a kind of a dependency, what Dr. Desai mentioned about it. And then this is the most commonest, and I won't name some of the good toothpaste which are available. They too had a content of 10 milligram to 18 milligram, which is like almost smoking 5 to 6 cigarettes a day. So I would, really request this that, this kind of course, what we call about the pan masalas, we call about the cannies and things like that. Other than this is something which is really getting into at a root level, and probably, it is involving our younger generations too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for your remarks. And we are now about to reach the conclusion. Before I introduce the person who's going to deliver the vote of thanks, let me also thank you. Yes, Dr. Khilani, I'm so sorry I forgot, but you've already spoken once, so yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So I know I am isolated on the
No,
the issue of.
We are with you.
Sir, we are all together.
I'll take only 2.5 minutes. 3 issues I need to say about the electronic cigarettes. The literature was threadbare discussed. Few issues I would like to say. It was discerned and concluded that introduction of electronic cigarettes, which was not so rampant as tobacco chewing or smoking, if introduced, it will lead to more use of nicotine and the electronic cigarettes among the younger masses, number one. Number two, it will not lead to reduction in the tobacco smoking. Number three, the scientific studies which were not sponsored by the tobacco industry discerned that it does not lead to quitting of tobacco. That is why this August committee headed by Dr. Reddy, of which I was a part of the ICMR committee, recommended or forwarded the report to the government that electronic cigarettes are not going, is not good for quitting. It will lead to rampant use among, since it is at the beginning in this country. You cannot ban tobacco smoking, but you can surely ban something which is just coming up. That was done. That is one part. Second part is dissociating nicotine from smoking or chewing. Nicotine is a medicine or a drug, as one of the doctors said. It may be a drug, it may be healer. Nicotine is the drug. What causes cancer? What causes COPD? Is not nicotine. 7,000 compounds contained in the cigarette cause COPD and lung cancer. Compounds contained in the tobacco chewing, it's not the nicotine. So that's how the nicotine gum, nicotine sprays are authorized to be used for quitting, because they are good. Final thing is about the, I don't know anything about law, sir.
No, but you know about ends.
I know everything about it.
Yeah. You talk about ends.
And now finally, I will give a simile. Government has banned that you can't drive a two-wheeler without helmet. Now I can say that, okay, it's my life, I want to drive a two-wheeler, I may die, who cares? It is a responsibility of government to implement laws and rules and the norms for the benefit of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khilnani. I must point out we are 20 minutes, running 20 minutes late, so I have to conclude this. And before I introduce our speaker who will give the vote of thanks, let me also say it is impossible at a consultation like this or a seminar like this to come to agreement or come to terms with what needs to be done. Nobody can agree. All of us cannot agree. We've seen that as Mr. Bhasin spoke. His speech stood out because he was very clear in what he had to say, that he thinks it's unconstitutional and there is no way they can ban e-cigarettes, forget anything else. There were other speakers who spoke passionately. There were doctors who spoke passionately. There were professors like Professor Bijon Mishra who spoke passionately. So all I'm trying to say is it's impossible to come to agreement on this. But I hope this has been a beginning to at least start the consultation and keep that door ajar on not completely shutting that door on alternative as far as smoking is concerned, or at least harm reduction. What harm reduction may be, we can differ on that, but at least start the conversation on what harm reduction can be in India, at least learn from the best practices across the world. Without taking too much of your time now, let me just introduce one of my mentors, as well as a great friend, and also founder and editor of Policy Circle, the organization that has brought to you today this seminar and hopefully many more in the future. Anil Nair, please give a huge round of applause to Anil Nair, who will give the vote of thanks for today's seminar.
Thank you, Arthur. What can one say after all these brilliant presentations? I thought I will conclude the speeches today, but I'm at my wit's end. I don't think I will say anything further. But one thing I learned from this entire conversation is that lawmaking should be more serious. I think government and parliament should take all scientific evidence before making laws so that they stand the test of time. On that note, Arthur is already saying that it's 20 minutes late. On that note, I would like to thank my speakers, speakers who were in the plenary session, Dr. Sri Suresh Prabhu, Rajiv Gowda, Aruna Sharma, and Dr. Madan Gopal, and the brilliant speakers of this session, Dr. MC Mishra, Lalit Bhasin. Sir, it was amazing. I never knew that government has and parliament has so many restrictions before they make law. And Dr. Nimesh Desai, and as always, Dr. Bijon Kumar Mishra. Amazing, brilliant presentations. I thank you all. Special thanks to the participants who debated brilliantly with the panelists. All of us got enriched by your views. Special thanks to you guys. And thanks are due to Monica Bachchan of Metallurgic PMS, who helped us conduct this event. And of course to Athar Khan, who brilliantly, brilliantly anchored the event. Now may I ask all of you to join me and my colleagues for lunch. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Great, sir. फोटो क्या सर अदर युवा के हाँ जी कहाँ गए मैडम हाँ मोनिका एंड सजना जी कहाँ है या मास्क पहन ले नहीं पहने मास्क नहीं पहने नहीं फोटो के लिए मास्क नहीं ओके
Thank you. Thank you very much.
वली साहब क्या हाल है?
Thank you.
birthday.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Wali sahab. Thank you. Very nice. You see, my only point is, Srinath I know very well, and we have worked for 4 years in the FCTC in Geneva, constantly going. The point which I'm making is, then in FCTC clearly mentioned that we will talk about harm reduction and we do initiatives on harm reduction. And India goes and bans it. I mean, I know what was Priti Sudan's mission. Priti Sudan wanted to become the real hero in Geneva by announcing this. India is the first one to ban, But that is not the answer.
I would like to have a
Why is it so? That means